Welcome back, everybody, to the Growing Band Director podcast. This is episode number 87, and I'm here with Jeff Leonard. How are you?
Very well, thanks.
So I've only taught 20 years. You've taught for?
I was in the public schools for 35, and then I've been out for 6. Where I've been at BU and Berklee.
It's crazy.
NBC.
It's crazy how closed the kind of states tend to be, because like I've been to stuff that you've been at, and vice versa. You probably didn't know about me at all, but I knew you.
No, I did. I did know. I remember. Well, I years ago I judged the Maine State Jazz Finals.
Okay.
Knew something about Westbrook. Knew something about the things that were going on up here.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I was familiar, and
Okay.
and of course I've done so much in New Hampshire over the years. New Hampshire's just been great for me.
Yeah.
I think I've done the Jazz All State group, the different ones, 4 or 5 times over, going back into the late 80s,
Yep.
and the Chamber Festival, 2 or 3 times, and I know a lot of the UNH folks, and I was up there. So yeah. I know about you UNH people. You're close enough.
Close enough. Yeah.
You're close enough that we can keep track and bring them down when we want to.
Yeah.
Like Jared Cassidy, for instance.
Well, thank you for making the drive up and
You bet.
and this hang and all this. I'm going to tell people a little bit about you and then get on to what we're going to talk about. So,
All right.
So if you don't know, so Jeff was at Lexington Schools as the K to 12.
I spent the last part of my career as the K-12 Performing Arts Coordinator.
And you were awarded Teacher of the Year in Lexington at one point.
Yeah, long time ago. That was
Great.
94.
Wow. Right now you're on the BU faculty and Berklee faculty.
Right.
And we're going to talk about one of the courses you're teaching at Berklee, which is sort of the framework for what we're going to talk about today.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And then, wow, these are amazing awards. Massachusetts Jazz Educators Lifetime Achievement Award, the Micah Hall of Fame, and Mass Music Educators Association Distinguished Service Award.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was around a long time.
Yeah. It's amazing. So I have a question I haven't prepared you for.
Okay.
So if this doesn't go
I
well.
like those. Those are even more fun.
Okay. And I wrote it down. As you reflect on your career, not that it's over, I don't mean that, but like if you reflect.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
As far as I know, I'm not headed anywhere.
Yeah. What really matters? Like, as you reflect.
For me, the thing that undergirds everything is relationships with people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are a whole list of things that come behind that, but to be able to engage students, faculty, parents, community members, have the opportunity to sell the art to them, to show them, how amazing it can be, how it can change their life, and how it doesn't need to be something that you go into for a living to be a part of for the rest of your life. I think that those relationships are the things that have stayed with me and the things that I look forward to. The idea of being able to, as a high school director, to be able to work with a student when they come in at, in 9th grade and watch them go out as they head out to college and watch that growth. And we are very fortunate as music directors in that situation, because we're not one and done like an English teacher or a science teacher. We get to build relationships, and oftentimes students will come to us for anything but music. Because you build a trust, you show that you care, there's an empathy that's there. And as long as you're genuine and real and caring, they understand that, and they will come back, and they'll reciprocate it 10 times to what you can give. I always felt like I've gotten so much more than I was able to give, because just so many great students. So that was the biggest one. Probably the one that goes under that, especially in a town like Lexington, is really developing an affinity for creative and artistic thinking and engagement with the arts. There are, and music I can speak to more, music and drama, which was what I was involved with, the performing arts. It's much more, it connects in a way that you get people that really are fascinated by this, and they dig into everything. They throw everything into that when they're in high school, from the time they're there. And then they're talking about doing it as a career, and the parents go, wait, hold it. You have to make a living. And to me, part of speaking to folks in there is involvement in the arts doesn't have to be about making a living, but it can always be about making your life better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something you can do forever. And it's a way to engage beyond whatever you do for your living. The Boston area has the Longwood Symphony, which is the medical symphony. It's all made up of doctors and hospital, and those are the folks that love to play, love to be a part of the arts. It is an all volunteer group, and they're high level of players. That, the fact that they choose that to be in their limited free time, something that's really important to them, and they feel really rewarded by it. That's what we can offer.
Right.
So I guess that's the next step down. It's not about making a living in music.
Yep.
It's about having music be a part of your life forever.
Right.
And there's always a place for you.
In the John Feyerabend method, when it's about creating students who are tuneful, beatful, and artful.
Right.
You talk about, can you dance in time with your daughter at her wedding, and can you, hold your baby and sing with a good voice? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
It's that not even always about being a performer, even though we want our kids to continue to play, but having that be a part. So when you have children, they're in music.
Exactly.
You're raising the culture.
Exactly, because it's something that's there, and that's. Even if they don't continue to be performers, if they continue to be patrons, if they continue to consume the arts, if they continue to be artistically minded in the things the way they do, that in itself, if they become consumers,
right,
then they're enhancing their life and contributing to the arts nation as a whole.
And that's our goal. Our goal is not to win bronze or platinum or gold or whatever it is.
One of my favorite stories was back in '99. The drummer we had a really, really good jazz band that year, and we had done so many. I had students to take me on so many great things. We had so many wonderful things going on, and we were headed down for the second time down to the Ellington finals in New York. And the band was starting to feel a little cocky and get a little bit lazy. And this drummer, who is now, as I remember correctly, he's now teaching elementary math for kids with special needs.
Wow.
In New York City. He stood up and he was the band president. He wanted to stand up and talk to him. Look around you. And of course, like every band rooms, you decorate with all the toys and the trinkets and the trophies and the plaques and things that come out. Look around. Look at this. Do you see look at this, people. Look at the years that this has been going on. Do you know what this means? Do you know what this means? And they're sort of looking at him. He goes, nothing. It means absolutely nothing. If we don't take the next step in what we're doing, we have failed what we can do. And I thought, I didn't have to say a word. This was this one student who came up and said, this is important. So
I was in a band room once, and I don't know if this is true, but it said the only thing you need to know about trophies is that Mozart never won one.
I like that.
Anyway.
All right, I'm stealing that.
Not that they're not nice,
Right?
I mean, it's nice.
Oh, right. And when you're building a program,
right,
it's good PR.
Right. Because if you get one, you got to put it in the front office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is, and there's, that's, for me, that was one thing about, now this is a little bit off topic a bit, but about taking the job as the coordinator, the coordinator. I had way more fun and was way more satisfied teaching music to students.
Yeah.
But I'd been in the town at that point 25 years. On the school committee, there were 5 members of the school committee, and I'd taught 4 of their kids. And I knew the ins and outs. So my ability to sit at the table and be the voice of what we needed to do and advocate for it was really important. I remember very specifically a graduate course I sat in up in Michigan anyway. It was about high school curriculum. I was the only arts coordinator. I'll keep it short. I was the only arts educator in the class. Everybody else was a general education class. And I had to miss a part of a day because I was involved with a recording. Anyway, doesn't matter. Came back, and the day was outline the ideal high school curriculum. And then there were small groups, 3 or 4 groups, and they got together and they started presenting. And the first one went, and the second went, and the third went, and I raised my hand and said, I'm sorry, I wasn't here, and I may have missed part of this, but is this just the academic curriculum? Because I heard 3 high school curriculums without a single arts program from anybody.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, sort of jaws drop in this, oh yeah. And what I learned from that is it's not malicious.
Right.
Most of the time. It's not malicious. It's just ignorance,
Mhm.
which is, excusable. We all are ignorant of this or that or the other. But the idea that we have that voice on the table, like the enslaved person on the back of a Roman chariot, all glory is fleeting. If someone's not there reminding
Yep.
the administration, the upper level administration, this is important, and a lot of kids here, and this is critical, and this is basic learning, and this is,
Yeah.
you can lose
Well, and
that.
if you consider that coordinator position is obviously like a high-ranking position, right?
It's middle management.
Okay.
Yeah.
But a lot of people would strive for a position like that, right?
Probably, yeah. It's a slight increase in salary,
right? But in some ways, at least personally, you probably took it like pretty selflessly, because if you're saying I'm going to have less fun, but I know that I'm the person for this job. Am I being accurate with that?
It is part of that. It was a decision that I had to sit and talk over, and I knew there would be different responsibilities, and I knew it would be a part of it. I also did feel that in terms of the people in town, that I was the one that could best do that job to serve the department.
Yep.
And if I could serve the teachers as I had served the students.
Yep.
When I was working with students, the idea is to clear their path so it's all about the learning and the connections they make. If I can take the stuff off the teacher's plate and take the distractions away from them so they can focus on what they're doing with their students, then we're going to be a stronger department. Yeah.
So you're sitting down with your younger self when you started teaching in 1982.
82.
Okay.
Yeah, fall of 82.
Okay. So you're sitting here with your 1982 self.
Okay.
Like what are the couple lessons you would tell?
That's a great question.
Young Jeff.
It took me a year or two to realize that you really have to become close with the custodial and front office staff, that those are the people that will help you out more than anybody in terms of spaces and rooms and that sort of thing. That you should take more time when plotting, when laying out the path in front of you, because so many times I started in the just west of the southwest corner, and I went all the way around to get to the other side of the southwest corner instead of figuring out a way to take that step out. So think about where the shortcuts can be made and that sort of thing. And then I think the other thing I would say, because it's something someone said to me, and of course I really believe that almost everything that any of us are able to do, and there's this stolen from somebody that's motivated you.
Yes.
Talk to the students in your school, whatever school it may be, and also talk to other teachers or administrators. Find out who the 3 or 4 best teachers in the school of any subject are, and go sit in their class and watch what they do, watch how they connect, watch how they deliver, watch how they motivate. I did that my first year. I remember sitting in an English teacher's class who went on later to become an assistant principal. He got pulled into it by a principal. He loved it. There's a whole video library of him in the Harvard School of Education library of him teaching English classes and how to do it. And he was the first academic subject teacher I saw that delivered a lesson like we do in the arts, sort of this passion and this fire, and let's get this, and come on, no, this is great, come on. And at the end of the class, I realized he was delivering what could have been a very dry lesson on gerunds. But he had me on the edge of my chair wanting to learn. So watch what people do. The other thing I would say to music educators specifically, when you go to conferences and conventions, be very fussy about what you choose. Take it seriously when you're doing your professional education. And anytime you're not sure, watch rehearsal. Watch rehearsal. I learned so much from watching other people work. Things, I'm borrowing this is great, what a good idea. Why are they doing that? That doesn't make any sense to me. I need to learn more about that. Where did that come from?
Because everywhere you go, there's these people working on the bands,
Right.
and nobody's watching them,
Right.
Or very few are,
Right. I mean, I'd chaperone kids to all Eastern, and and I'd sit in. There was Colburn, the Marine Band conductor there, and there'd be 5 of us in the back of the room. And as soon as he got started, our scores would come out, and really nerdy, geeky sort of things. But the things you can learn being on the other side of the music. And I guess finally, and this is something I adhere to as well, I would say, keep doing what made you fall in love with this in the first place. For me, that was to keep playing. It was in high school when I got really, really, really hooked on it. And don't let that go away. If you can find any opportunities, community groups, theater groups, wherever community orchestras, anything that you want to play or sing or be involved with, do it. Because as a teacher, being on the other side of that music, of that conductor stand, helps you in terms of how you're proceeding and what you're doing too.
Sure.
So you're learning your craft as well as participating in that which brings you joy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those would probably be the 3 things I would try. And then my 1982 self would go, I don't have time for that. I'm going to see what, we'll see what we could do and figure it out as we went along. But
I would sit with myself and say, program easier music. Just because you left somewhere that's doing grade 9 or whatever, make it right.
That was something I learned over the period of time. Part of it was involvement in Micah very early on. Dick Castilian, who was the chairman of the music division of Boston Conservatory, and then later went down to James Madison University of Virginia. He would do district and all-state groups, and he always underprogrammed them technically.
Yep.
And just worked them musically to death. If the intonation, the phrasing, the shaping, the connection, the understanding, it was everything in terms of how we put that together. And watching that was when I took away from it, I said, okay. And for me, what it came down to is planning curriculum for the year.
Yep.
Where I would, start out both in wind bands and jazz band things with easier, so not grade 6. If I was working the wind ensemble, which was really a lot of all-state players in that, we'd work grade 4 things, but really work it out, really talk about the musicality and talk about what everybody's responsibility was and how to balance and how to articulate and all the things you're going to do. Drama teacher that I work with used to call things like that, go slow to go fast. Start at the beginning of the year and really make sure everybody knows the expectations and what you want from rehearsal and what you expect for what is acceptable for higher level playing. And as soon as they understand and have a grasp on those skills, then you can feed them literature like popcorn.
Yep. And you base it based on what they can do, what those kids can do.
Exactly.
Not, okay, we're in high school, we're doing grade 4.
Exactly.
You might have to do grade 2.
Right.
Because that's where they're at. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. And, the truth is the grading of music, that 1 through 6 grade scale, it's only about technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Everything's a grade 6 if you're talking about musical content.
Yeah.
In fact, most of my students in Lexington, as soon as you passed out something that was bel canto, the Manumus O Manu Mysterium or Irish tune, you'd be like, okay, we're in for it now. Here we go. We better get to work. Yep. And you could see them dig in a little bit more and listen and find the shapes of everybody else's phrases and how to weave together. And they knew that was harder work than
so many of us think that, the harder you program, the better teacher you are, the better your program is, right? And then you realize real quickly when you're force feeding the music, you're like, okay, this doesn't feel right.
Larry Ratcliffe used to talk about that. I don't know if familiar with Larry.
I know his name.
Yeah. He just passed away a couple of years ago. But after I got to Lexington, in Andover, I was there for 1 year, and I was working with the beginning elementary students and a middle school band. And the skills that I had and the musical knowledge I had got me through that pretty well, and I was able to really advance kids. When I got to Lexington and was working at the high school, there was an upper level there that had been established in a lot of places. And it was like, and I knew within a year or even half a year, I need more. I did not get enough from my undergraduate training as a conductor, as a score study and all that. So I studied with Larry Ratcliffe, who at that point, I think he was either at Oberlin. He may have been at Oberlin at that point. And I studied with him in summers. He was down at Central Connecticut, and I took and learned. He used to say, good programming is a piece for the heart, a piece for the fingers, a piece for the mind. And if you can do that and find the technical difficulty that fits you, you've got a great program.
That's great.
So I always like that. One for the heart, one for the fingers, one for the mind.
That's great. You talk about being picky when you go and watch clinics, but being picky about what you program. Like you should kick out more pieces than you accept, right? Don't just go, I like that. That's what we're going to do.
Right.
You can put on your list for now, but keep listening because pretty soon something's going to knock that off.
Yeah. And even somebody, I did my master's, I did my master's all over the place. I was at one school and it closed, and I went to another school, and the head person who was in charge of it left and went back to the original. I was at NEC to BU to NEC to BU, finished at BU. But I did some studying with Frank Battisti at BU when I was working there. And he used to talk about sort of programming concerts and, be more demanding of your student, move through things more quickly, start with simple literature, have them devour it. And someone asked him about pop stuff. He said, well, if it's a steady diet, it's like a steady diet of junk food. But if you pull it out for something fun now and again and spend no more than a couple of weeks on it and put one out, great, do it. Let them have some fun too. Mm-hmm. Because people are out there making a living doing that. Yeah. So it's exactly right. Find the variety, find what they do well, yes, I'm sure you've seen this. Most of us have seen the same thing. They aren't sure about it when you put it in front of them. Mm-hmm. But if you've done your study, if you've gotten into what you find the piece to be great and the reason you think it's there, and you work on that in rehearsal and you create the listening assignments to do all the work, by the end of the process, the majority of them are going to love that piece. Yep. And some will still say, I didn't really like that one that much. Yeah. It's fine. Okay. Yeah. Did you learn anything from it?
Yeah. I'll often do at the end of you do a concert reflection, and okay, we did 4 pieces. What was your favorite? And for me, if one of these pieces doesn't get a vote, I often won't do it again. Right. Because I pride myself on it's basically split down the middle on all of them. So the programming thing is just enormous. Tom Lazat says it's 90% of the work is done before the first note of the first rehearsal. I don't know 90% of the success of the program. Okay, that I could go into. The work is not the work, the success. The success, yeah. I mean, we have a responsibility to feed them the most nourishing literature we can give them. Yeah. I mean, and that's where Larry. You come back to Larry. Is a piece for the fingers, a piece for the heart, a piece for the head, a piece for the mind. You're really covering everything they need to do. You're working on them as technicians and working on cleaning that up. You're trying to touch them here to make them feel something, and you're trying to give them something to make them reflect on and think. Yeah. And there's so much music out there that can do that. I mean, that's something I do have to say, that the difference between what's come available in the last 40 years is remarkable. It was always marches and orchestral transcriptions, and the occasional gem is what we had. And I guess, and this might even go back to what you're saying about what would you tell them? And this would be for ensemble directors, and that's what we're talking about here anyway. Yeah. Know the score, learn the score, and do it. When I started out, it was really interesting. First of all, there really weren't recordings of wind band music. There wasn't anything out there. Frederick Fennell had a record, a record from Eastman. There's a great story about that. I saw him at All Eastern when he was talking about that. If you're familiar with it, he does all the gems, the folk song suite and the whole things and that sort of thing. And someone questioned about the march and the folk song suite. Everybody was sort of patting around it and playing up to him. This was either an All Eastern or a national convention. I can't remember which. And so finally someone said, the march movement of the folk song suite was faster than we would usually consider a British march, and wonder why you chose that tempo. He said, well, I had to. It wouldn't fit on the record. If I took it slower, we wouldn't get it all on the record. I'd never play it that way in person. But how many people, when they heard that Frederick Fennell record, said, that's the way you have to do that? Right. And that was the stigma about listening to recordings. In my people, don't listen to recordings. Yep. You be original, do your own. Well, for me, I go just the opposite now. Listen to as many recordings as you can find. Mm-hmm. Sit the score in front of you, analyze it, go through as many recordings as you can find. Then you, as a musician, have to make up your mind.
how you want the interpretation, and as an artist, what you can do with it, depending on what your students can do and what instrumentation you have and all of those sort of things. But just be as prepared as you can when you walk in, so you can be as efficient as you can in rehearsal time, because one of the things that turn kids away more than anything else is dead, wasted time in rehearsal.
Yeah. That's an art form.
Yeah, and it's preparation. It's all about preparation. It's if the conductor goes in and you're trying to learn a piece on the band, well, you're going to have a rough time with that.
So you're doing a course at Berklee, Advanced Rehearsal Techniques in Wind Band and Jazz Bands.
Mm-hmm.
Are we able to talk about that?
Yeah.
Even though we haven't paid the Berklee tuition?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
It's fine. We'll consider it advertising.
When you say advanced, what do you mean by advanced?
Well, the truth is, because it's a graduate level course, they wanted the word advanced in it somewhere.
Okay.
But for me, it should be a continuation of what you've done in instrumental methods.
Okay.
It should be taking it a step further and deepening what you're doing with your study and how you study and how you approach rehearsal.
Okay.
Including the preparation, but also including how you interact, how you have a scheme and a plan for teaching specific things, developing a hierarchy of what's important. As I said, one of the things that really, when I started at Boston Conservatory, which is when I was still teaching in Lexington, actually it was my last 8 years of teaching in Lexington, they had a master's program for music education that was originally designed, as I recall, for students who had undergraduate degree in music education and who were certified to come and get their master's, because it was mostly summer. You did some things through the year.
Yeah.
But if you were employed, and Massachusetts requires you to get your master's within 5 years of starting your job, that can be hard to do. So it was a really smart thing that they set up. Summertime. Here's the summer. You can come get it. You'll do a few things during the year, but you're really free to go back and do your work. The problem with the program was that they weren't able to fund it with enough people. So they created a certification line, and that created a whole set of different problems for them. They provided things for a whole lot of good people, but it was too scattershot, and they were taking courses at the same time, and they found that most people who did not have an undergraduate degree in music education really struggled to get all the pedagogy they needed in 2 7-week summer sessions.
Yep.
So when Berklee and BOCO merged, the state says you can't offer that anymore. But I was teaching part of that course, and what I was teaching was jazz rehearsal techniques, jazz pedagogy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anywhere else that teaches that. Mm-hmm. In fact, I've got a whole series of workshops that I've done at Allstate and various conferences around. I initially had to change the language on this because a friend of mine was really annoyed by it. But I called the first workshop that I did "Jazz for Oboe Players." Dude, what do you mean? Let's call that "Jazz for the Classically Trained." Yeah, let's do that instead. Yeah. Yeah, those are also the things you learn.
Can we hit some of the highlights?
Absolutely.
Of the jazz side of things on the rehearsal technique?
Sure.
The Cliff Notes version, or a couple, whatever.
It'll be quick. Some of the most important things is, first of all, to realize that between jazz, and we'll talk about wind band music, because most of our jazz students will come from the wind band, with the exception of some of the rhythm section maybe. Yeah. But between those ensembles, between jazz ensembles and classical ensembles, there are only 2 real differences. One is the way you interpret rhythms and articulation, mm-hmm. and the other is the reliance on improvisation. Mm-hmm. That's it. Everything else, you still have 12 notes. You still have the same dynamic markings. You still have the same articulation markings. It's how you interpret them. Mm-hmm. You still have the same rhythms you're looking at. It's just how you interpret them. Mm-hmm. So the idea there is to break down, first of all, for me, the rhythms and the articulations, and you have to line those up together, because one is dependent on the other, and improvisation are equal partners for me. Mm-hmm. In my mind, and this may sound a little harsh, if you're not teaching improvisation, you're not teaching jazz. Right. And again, in these workshops, and this will just be a brief aside, someone would say, well, I only get to see them half an hour. I see my middle school kids only half an hour once a week for jazz. I said, well, then spend 5 minutes doing improvisation. But it's part of jazz, and you should really be a part of that. Yeah, take 5 minutes to do something. And there are all sorts of methods for that, and that's one of the things that I do when we get into improvisation.
And so it's like, because I'm in the middle of programming for next year and all that, and,
Right.
And I agree. Even if all you're doing is blues, rhythm changes, and how to identify 2-5-1s and a couple keys, right? That's improvisation. We're not talking about giant steps for everybody. No. We're just talking about actual teaching.
And even take it beyond that. Look at things like even simpler. Blues is one thing. If you're starting out with the basic blues scaling, you're talking about creating melodies and creating rhythms. But you can also get into things like something similar to impressions or something like that. It's just modal.
Yeah.
And create melodies. Right. Yeah. 2 scales. Create melodies in a modal form. Jamie Abersol used to do those things where he would do 3.
Yep.
All right. You do F minor, E flat minor, and D minor, and then everybody would play 8 bars on each. And of course, the idea with that is getting beyond just. And I did this. This is something I learned over time and stretched on. Teaching improvisation first for me was about, when I first started, it was about theory and understanding notes and the chords and making the changes and understanding that. And it wasn't until later where I started to get into melodies and phrasing and sound versus silence and how to integrate them. But that's all part of what you can do. And you can use a C major scale and do that. You can just but it's important.
Choosing literature for the jazz ensemble that's based on tunes or chord changes that you want them to improvise on.
Right.
Like we chose this tune because you might have 5 tunes that could fit in your closer role or whatever for a festival. But if one is Autumn Leaves and the other one's Giant Steps, we'll go with Autumn Leaves because you can teach improvisation.
Yeah. And you can and for the festival, for the group to sound their best, which you always want them to do, whether they're at their home or anywhere, they're gonna sound better if the music doesn't stop when the improvisation starts.
Yes.
I've been to a lot of state jazz festivals where I've seen, especially ones where marching band is big in that state, that the band in the opening chorus, they're cracking, everything is great, it's right together, and then the soloing starts, and I hear the same bass line over and over again. The chords, the piano's comping the same rhythm of the same chords, and the solo's either playing something written or playing something that has nothing to do with what's going on. And the whole thing falls apart. Music ceases to be.
What about the band that plays Satin Doll, and then when the kids solo, Satin Doll's in C, and then they go in solo in B flat.
They change keys for them.
Like the kid, if you heard the bands, that the kids always play in B flat, no matter what the chord changes are.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right.
And I've heard that in blues things. Yeah. They're playing an F blues, but they're playing a B flat blues. Right.
And I can't say I have never had a kid do that, because you're like, sometimes a kid, it's their first time improvising, and maybe that's where they're at. You just got them out. But if that happens often, then obviously
and kids, you're experimenting. Let's face it, improvisation is the most difficult and most sophisticated skill in music. Period. You have to be a composer and you have to be a performer, and you have to do it simultaneously. It's really hard.
I think the biggest first step is making them not self-conscious. Making them okay with getting up and making mistakes and playing, and then you have mold to work with.
Well, it's funny, and what you remember as a kid is when you have that success, and that led me down as a junior high student way back when, and I was in the summer jazz band because I wanted to move up in the band and that sort of thing, and I was in a solo, and it was one that was written, and I got lost in it, and suddenly I played something that was in the key of F, so I was in G, playing tenor sax. And suddenly at the end of it, I played this thing that had a B flat in it. It came down and it sounded bluesy. And my teacher went, yeah. And I thought, I've discovered the key to improvisation. You play a B flat. That's it. That's how and then when the next tune came up and it was a different key and I played a B flat and it didn't sound so good. And I thought, oh, okay.
I learned, I mentioned 2-5-1s a little while ago.
Yep.
And I know there's teachers out there who don't really know what those are. So can I just take a minute on that?
Sure.
So if you look at many tunes, if we talk about a 2-chord, if people know their basic harmony, the 2-chord is a minor chord, and the 5-chord is usually a major chord with a flatted 7th, dominant chord. And then the 1 chord if we go with the basic form, is a major.
It's a major chord, right? Mm-hmm.
So if you look for these patterns in the solo sections, if you look for a minor and a dominant and a major, then you don't even have to play on those chords, right? You can say, okay, so maybe that's 1 bar and 1 bar and 2 bars. So it's like 4 bars. But really, if it's a D minor, G, C, they can play the C major scale over all of it.
They can.
Right? It's thinking about key areas.
Right.
So you can play Autumn Leaves on G harmonic minor and B flat major scale.
Exactly.
Right. So like when I learned that, it's like, wow, we're not,
and
that's
even
amazing.
Even G melodic minor.
Yep.
You can use the natural 6 on the tonic chord, which is more common. And that's a way to start. And then the next step is to differentiate between them, dealing with simple guide tone structures. Mm-hmm. Here are the 3rd and 7th. These are the most important notes.
Yep.
Notice when you go from the 3rd and the 7th now I'm going to stay in the key of C. You've got an F and a C, and that becomes an F and a B.
Yep.
There's the change between these 2 chords. Is there a way you can create a melody? Play half notes that follows that. Mm-hmm. Play half notes, or just play those notes and create a rhythm on those notes. Do, 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 do. There you are. You've done something.
Then when you go from G7 to C, the F moves down to the E.
The F moves down to the E, or you can stay on the B. Mm-hmm. The Orff model of improvisation worked really well for me for beginning groups. And if you're familiar with what elementary school Orff does for improvisation, is they take away all the bars that don't sound good, and everything you play is going to sound good.
Yep.
So if you lay out for students initially, here are the notes that are going to sound good in what you're playing. Here's what you want. And then also work on phrasing, articulation. So many young students don't know when to stop playing.
Yep.
They'll play the same note 4 and 5 times in a row because they feel they got to play something. Mm-hmm. It's a great exercise. I don't remember where I stole this one, but I use it a lot, especially with beginning improvisers. Even if you're just using a blues scale, put a blues progression, the most basic of blues progressions, up on the board.
1, 4, and 5.
1 for 4 bars. 4, 4, 1, 1, 5, 5, 1, 1.
Yep.
All right. Teach them just the blues scale. Let's start with just the blues scale. Let's not even bother with the rest of that. But what do all those structures have in common? The 3rd bar of each phrase is a 1 chord. Mm-hmm. So let's do this. Play an active line and resolve it on the 3rd bar and rest for the rest of it. Don't play the rest of the bar. All right. And really hold them to that.
Yep.
After they've gone that a few times and they've created a few things on that, then say, okay, now let's add this. Add a response. Play your line, resolve, and then play a little response. And then repeat it. Mm-hmm. So it's not an active random. Mm-hmm. Try and repeat the same thing because you're developing your ears. The ear-to-hand skills in improvisation is so critical and so important. Repeat it. Do it again. All right. Then the 3rd step is to play that phrase, play your response, and then play a pickup into the next phrase. And suddenly you've got a full jazz phrase that you can play over and over again. But it's a piece at a time. That was a lesson I learned my first year teaching jazz improvisation in Lexington. There's always another step. There's always a way to break it down. There's another scaffold that you can put in there to make it easier. And a
couple things I do when I have my younger kids improvising in full jazz ensemble, because for a lot of our kids, they're not in a combo or not in an improv class. That's the place.
The jazz ensemble is what you've got.
Yep. And this kid is taking a solo because you've said you're going to solo now. And most of them are saying, I don't want to do this in their head. But the rhythm section's going on and they end up playing. And at the end, everybody claps for them. You say, that was a great job, and you move on. Like, that's one of the things I do at the beginning to have them go, oh, this is pretty safe.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying you're going to do this at festival right now, but just getting more kids to do it and support each other. The worst thing you can do is pick on a kid.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. You can give some feedback. Yep. Hey, next time try this. Something like that. But always be supportive. Put yourself out there. Take a chance. Everybody misses it. Everybody has to learn and go through these steps. And I find, and this is a big thing that I'm on, and this is part of this class that we were talking about, is talking about dealing with improvisation techniques from the first time they pick up their instrument.
In 5th grade.
Yes, it should be a part of what you do at the end of every class is create some improvisation. Let them improvise. It doesn't need to be jazz, but it needs to be you create a melody. You create your own melody around these. So use these notes. That's the Orff method.
Yep.
Use these 3 notes.
Yep.
Look, I'll play back and forth. I'll play 3 notes and you here are the 3 notes I'm going to play. And you play exactly what you hear. So I play it and I play it. All right, now I'm going to play those 3 notes and you play those 3 notes in a different order. Again, that's just this step at a time.
The first one is call and copy.
Call and copy. The
second one is call and response.
It would be call and respond or question and answer.
Yep.
Kind of thing.
And you do that in a big group of kids?
Yeah. Do that. But the nice thing, I'll do that I did with a wind ensemble and concert band. And of course, you'd always see the bassoon players going, oh no. but then they would get onto it. But the thing there is at the beginning, you make it completely safe. I do the call, the whole group does the response at the same time.
They can do whatever, and it's not on them.
Right. But they can try.
Yeah.
They can try and do something. And then you ask for volunteers. And then you start to go around and say, hey, just point. And once everybody gets a little comfortable.
Once the culture's there.
But it's the same sort of thing. Even you go to pros, jazz improvisation is a hit or miss. It's really difficult. And you're creating something spontaneously, and sometimes it's going to work, and sometimes it's not going to work. Yep. And that's okay. And it's part of being creative. And there's nothing negative. There's nothing evil about not playing the perfect solo. Then let's work the next step. Let's be expressive. Let's listen to this person play the same note. Then then the other thing that's a big part of me teaching improvisation, although I was talking about other rehearsal techniques, but the big part about teaching improvisation is, Clark Terry's 3 famous words, right?
What's the order?
Imitate, assimilate, innovate. Right. Yeah. So here is, take Miles Davis' first chorus on Freddie Freeloader. Dun, 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 ba-da-ba-dum, dun. Learn that from rote. Come in and play it. All right, and they do, and they play the notes, but they don't touch the articulation or the inferences in. Then you take that step. Well, can you make it sound more like Miles when you do it? Try and make it sound, listen how he lays back a little bit here, listen how he pushes here, listen how he goes that note. See if you can do that, and then come back and do it tomorrow. And have all the class go around and do it. And of course, everybody in it, they're all in the same assignment, and they are right behind each other. They're roaring, they're clapping. Bass players, piano players, drummers on vibes. Learn this. This is what you got to do.
There's a Michael Sweeney arrangement of Freddie Freeloader that uses the first chorus and it puts it in the trumpet section as like a soli.
Right.
So but when I did that, I didn't, no offense to Michael Sweeney, I didn't use parts 2 and 3 and 4. All the kids played the solo.
Right.
And then the saxophone section, I inserted part of the cannonball solo or something.
Yeah.
But
yeah. And those, but there is, are you familiar with the Lisa Lindy out of Newton South? She started this group, Jazz Hers.
Yep.
Really working hard to try and get more girls involved in jazz groups. And she's even struggling with it. And my contention is, and we've talked about this a lot, is that we don't start them early enough. And of course, this is a generalization, but it's generalizations have their place. Girls mature more quickly than boys. Girls, when they get to high school, particularly if they're just starting, then they have developed a much stronger sense of self-awareness and self-consciousness. And we all know that most high school boys will do any fool thing and think it's cool. Yeah. And so there's this stigma about that is unfair to the girls, but they have got it as developed. How do you get past that? You start them younger. You start them when that doesn't exist. The whole gender issue doesn't matter in 5th grade. You're not really talking about that in that sense. Yeah, there are people who are thinking and feeling that way, but it doesn't have to do with music. You're talking about something, and everybody's starting at the same place. Yep. And they're more willing to take risks. So if you get them going, and elementary school and then continue it into middle school, you're gonna probably get more girls involved.
And it's also a great way to practice your scales too. If you're doing whatever with any level group, do 1, 2, 3 only, but do it in B instead of B flat.
Right.
It's great.
1, 3, 5. And then take it another step. Let's as you get a little more advanced, and by middle school they can do this if you really work with them on it. Work on just the triads. Play the triads for each of these chords. Just play the triads and play some melody on the triads, but just take everything else away. Just use those 3 notes. Everybody's going to advance at a different level on that. You're not going to produce a whole, world of whoever, Jaleel Shaw, whatever. Everybody's going to find their niche in that. But that's the case with every kid we have sitting in our ensemble. They're all going to be playing at a different level. They're all going to invest in it at the point that makes them feel connected, makes them feel good, that makes them feel comfortable.
Yep.
And not everybody is going to excel, but everybody can participate and enjoy it. And that's making it joyful is a big part of it. And that the supportive end that you mentioned is key to that. Yep. And what I found is, because we used to, in one of the things for Lexington, our curriculum during the day was small group oriented. Not that we'd have a quintet, but we'd have 15 kids in a class and we'd work in a small group. We'd work in small groups and everybody would improvise, and rhythm section players would swap off, or you go into different rooms and this sort of thing. And so everybody was experimenting, pushing each other, and they became so supportive of each other. They were there for each other, and they knew what each other's ability was, and they were empathetic with other people. I can't remember a time in 35 years when I saw a kid roll his eyes because someone else was playing.
Right.
At the end of it, there would be a little vocal support, or something like that.
Because you're your own worst critic.
Always.
Yeah.
Always. Everybody is.
And teaching the kids that is important.
Yeah. I had a student, Sasha Brown, really great guitarist, really terrific jazz guitarist. And he was just crazy about Mark Whitaker. Just loved Mark Whitaker's playing. And he went to NYU for school and went to a jazz club when Whitaker was playing. And he sat through the first set just mesmerized. He thought it was like, this is the best thing I've ever heard. And Sasha was never shy about going up. And he started to walk, and they were, of course, it may have been the Vanguard or something. They were going back through the kitchen, and Sasha was going to go and talk. He was going to talk to Mark. I'm sorry, Mark Whitfield. I got the wrong name. Whitfield. He was going to talk to Mark Whitfield. And he got around the corner, and he heard the guitarist Whitfield say, "God, if I play that shitty again, just shoot me." And he was like, "What?"
Wow.
So it was like he hung on every note.
Yeah.
And the player himself was like so disappointed with how it had gone. So
perspective. So we talk about improvisation, but also rhythmic.
Right.
The rhythmic aspect of jazz. So besides, I assume most people understand that when you're talking about the basic concept of swing, we're talking about a triplet feel with the first two thirds of the triplet tied together. So it's 2/3 of a beat, 1/3 of a beat. Right. That's how we play our notes.
But if we haven't started teaching jazz or that rhythmic feel in elementary school, when they get to high school, and if that's the first place they touch a jazz band, it's going to be foreign, completely foreign.
Yep.
It's going to be like trying to speak unaccented, Spanish.
Yep.
It's not going to work. So it's breaking that down and explaining that, and that's exactly it. And then creating a series of exercises that you can do with your full band that take them through that. Add to that the way that should be articulated. So that's why I'm saying they have to layer on top of each other. I can footnote this one. This is stolen primarily from Herb Pomeroy, about the Charleston rhythm in jazz, which is what is the fundamental foundation. There's so much, especially young jazz, written with that rhythm. 1 and an accent 3/8 things later. Dot, 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 dot. And it might be those both might be short. Bop, bop. It may be sustained. Do, do, right? Yeah, and then all of the other permutations. Do, 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 do. do, 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 right? All of those are different permutations, and it may be, and then you may sustain it. Do, 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 do. You know, there are about 8 or 12 of them that you can print out. Work scales, do warm-ups on those articulation exercises, making sure, being really fussy about them, because the more detailed you can get, the strongest note is that 4th, 8th note. That's where the emphasis has to be. If we're playing nothing but concert band music and marches the whole time, we're always going to be downbeat oriented. Yep. So turning that around through a series of scaffolded exercises is really important. And even with high school groups, I can count on one hand the number of jazz groups I've gone in to observe that do a warm-up. We always do it with our bands. We always do it with orchestras. Choruses always warm up. Jazz band, you start up, pull up this chart, let's go. Yeah. Warm-ups are where the teaching happens. So especially, even if you have a really good group, beginning of the year, unify their style, unify their idea of articulation. There'll be new people, there'll be old people. If you've got returning people, they're your leaders. And they're the people who are going to help you set the example for the people who haven't been there. New people can come along with it pretty quickly if it's being played next to them. And I do explain it intellectually, but that is far less meaningful and far less persuasive than actually hearing it and then learning how to do that.
Did you teach with your horn most of the time?
Yes. Yeah. Every jazz class, I always had a soprano sax right here.
Sopranos. Okay. So Phil Snedeker came up one time, the great trumpet player, and he was doing a lesson with some of our kids. It was it happened once, of course, and he looked at me and he said, "You must be a great band director." And I'm like, "He's saying this. This is amazing. Yeah. Why would you think that?" He's like, "Your horn's right next to your podium." He's like, "You must teach with that." I said, "Yeah, all the time." He said, "Not enough people do that."
Yeah, he's dead right.
Yeah,
he's dead right.
You can explain it, but if you go
right,
do that.
Yeah, and even in the wind ensemble, for me, the soprano was easiest because it's put it together. There it is, right? Yeah, it's really quick. It's right there, and I'd use the Leger reed so they could pick it up anytime and it would play. Yeah. But even in wind ensemble, when I talk about no. Listen to the articulation we're looking for here for the length of these notes. Listen to this. I could explain it, say this needs to be a little longer and a little more separation there. Play it once, they got it. Yep. Talk about how a phrase should be shaped. We need something more dynamically like this. We need to taper. We need to grow. Something like this, Yeah. And when you get more comfortable with it, you can, show the tuba player what they need to do and all that sort of thing. Yeah, it's efficient.
Yep.
It's efficient. I can talk about something forever and they might get it. I can play it once and they all hear it and understand it.
Yep.
Or you may have to have them repeat it 2 or 3 times till they understand what the fundamentals are in their mouth. But
2 things regarding articulation that come up to me. Somebody who I've talked to says, as long as they're playing connected notes, it's going to swing. I mean, as long as they're playing the 2/3, 1/3, and there's no space. Right? He doesn't even talk about tonguing or slurring. It's just do da do da do da do da, and as long as it's connected, then it swings.
Right.
And other people I talk to talk about the offbeat articulation, right? Where it's do da woo da woo da woo da. Right. But that can swing like a brick if it's short. Do da what da what da what da what.
Yeah. Da 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 da.
So if you articulate the offbeat to the onbeat, but make them all long except for the last note, that's going to swing out the door.
Yeah. So. I have a chart, and there's actually a much more extensive one in the Willie Hill Dick Dunscombe book about how to approach articulations. I have one that I made. I did it on Sibelius and creates it. That keeps it much shorter and sets out basic articulation rules they're never. Nothing is 100%, but these are the things you want to think. And this needs to long means completely long.
Yep.
All right. And that's important, and you need to connect. Yet the emphasis has to be on the afterbeat.
If anybody's interested in more of that, you mentioned Dick Dunscombe. I had the pleasure of having him on.
Oh, yeah?
On episode 76, maybe. But it was all that stuff. We went right through all of it. And that's what's great about podcasts. Stuff is just up forever.
Yeah.
So this wisdom you're giving us, happen in 10 years, somebody go, I found this new session.
Well, the Willie Hill Dick Dunscombe book came out in 2001 or 2 or something like that. And the interesting thing about it is there are discrepancies within that book about how, Dick thought, well, no, this way, and Willie thought, no, this way. And so there are variations on it depending on who put it. But none of it's wrong. And it's a great fundamental foundational. Now, the charts in it are probably, they're 20 years outdated now.
Yep.
Some of them are still good. There are a lot of other ones that are out there. But the basic ideas, how to set up a band for rehearsal, how you make your choices. And there's not one right way, but think about how to make your choices. It's a great book.
What's the name of the book?
Jazz Pedagogy.
Okay.
Yeah. Jazz Pedagogy. There may be something that comes after that. But yeah, Willie Hill and Dick Dumscombe. And it's great. I use it at Boko all the time. That was the primary text that people, and I figure, especially if you've got, people who have been raised in the classical tradition, here is what you need to know about this idiom, including some history and background, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
Especially now with with how we approach culture and how that culture connects with whatever it is we're teaching. Jazz is ripe for that.
Yep.
When we learn about the connection of African and Caribbean and European in some ways, and how those came together, and how there were specific spots in the country that allowed that synthesis to happen. It's fascinating, and it's part of the history of the United States, because that's probably our only cultural export is jazz music. Have we done anything else that's original? I don't know.
I'm not smart enough to know. Yeah, like there's a green cover from Alfred on St. James Infirmary by Tom Davis, which is like, but it's a great chart.
It is.
It's not hard, but it's St. James Infirmary.
Right.
So you can talk about all the history.
Right. Exactly. And that's contextualizing, I think, is critical, especially now, when we're starting to look more deeply into culture and things like that.
Tom Lizotte he would take a chart, but on the weekend, he'd drive down to New York City, and if they were doing Cotton Club Stop something, he'd actually go to the Cotton Club. He'd get the picture. Most of us would just find a picture online. No, he'd actually drive there, take a picture, and show the kids. Connections like that you can make.
And learning about all that. And then, the thing is, it was something I used to motivate younger students when they were coming up. They were there. They were going to be there. The parents were going to insist they were going to be there, so on and so forth. And I would say something like, you play video games? Oh, yeah, I play this and this, whatever, whatever it is that you're playing. Does it feel good when you get better at it? Yeah, it's just awesome when you can do this and that and the other thing. This is the same way. When you're struggling with it now, but if you spend a little time with it and learn more about it and get deeper into it, you're going to enjoy it in the same way or in a different way, but something that's big for you. You're going to enjoy something more if you get better at it. To get better at it, there are steps you need to take.
Yep.
But it's worth it, and you'll find you're going to be here. Your parents have told you have to sign up for this class. They bought your instrument. They're going to make you stay here. Wouldn't it be better if you come in here 4 days a week and you're better at it? Well, I guess so. But then most of them would take that to heart. And you could hear, they still weren't playing like your top players, but you could hear they were more invested. Part of that is actually going to one-on-one and giving them encouragement. Talking to the kids, say, how can I help you? Which is what, again, we mentioned this in our ex parte discussion there about the how fortunate we are as high school educators that we get to see most of our kids for 4 years.
Yeah.
So you can build those relationships where you can talk about anything and they get to trust you, and then they realize that you're not steering them the wrong way and you're not just feeding them company line.
Yeah. So we talked about the jazz side of things, but it's also a course on wind band rehearsal techniques.
Right, yeah.
So what are a couple of the highlights from that?
Well, the biggest thing is what I started with is study scores and listen.
Yep.
And listen critically and make up your own mind. But listen initially to help you uncover the score. There are very few of us who can look at a transposed score and understand all the harmony and understand everything that goes on there on first look.
Unless it's grade 2 and you just look in the low brass section. But other than that.
Right. But what you can do is use your ears to discover what fits, where is it going along, and just with the score, just make little notes about things you need to pay attention to and things that need to be brought out and things that are important. Develop strategies for how you're going to do that. That's where the beginning part, the beginning part starts. You're familiar with the Andy Boysen book, the idea, and we really need to do this with our instrumental methods class in our college courses, and we're going to be doing some of this. That here's an example. All right, what's the one thing you're going to rehearse? And I take it a step further with these students. It wasn't just what are you going to rehearse, how are you going to do it? What are you going to tell these students about that passage to make it better? Don't just say you need to fix that, because that doesn't help them.
So for people who haven't heard about the book, I've actually mentioned it a bunch of times. I actually had him and Lindsay on, I don't know, a year ago or so, talking about when the book was coming out, and he was at Midwest and did all that stuff.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about the premise of the book and why it's so great.
Well, the premise of the book is the way it's set up is Andy went around the country and found a variety of different high school and middle school bands that were trusted, had full instrumentation, people who do a good job. He put these 10 scores, all by Joseph, of course. But from grade 1.5 to grade 5, in front of these various groups. This is what I loved about it. The band would rehearse it, sight read it, whatever, and then very early in the process, they would read it through, right down, top to bottom.
Like 16 bars at a time, in short segments.
Right. Or sometimes he would do it all through, and he would divide it, and divide those segments. Sometimes it was straight through, and then he broke it up, so it could be either way.
Okay.
And then the same thing, as their dress rehearsal or their final rehearsal, here they are again before performance, and here's the same group. Now, then he would divide it up into 20 to 40 second segments. You, as the learner, would study the score, listen to a recording, check out the analysis of the piece, and listen. And you get one shot when that comes up. The recording is played, you get your 20 seconds, and you have to tell them what's the first thing you're going to go to rehearse. And as I recall, that was primarily where the book, there was occasionally a little bit of, well, do this or do that, but mostly it was, what are you going to rehearse first? What are you going to address? This class, in my class, I take it the next step, and how are you going to do that? What's the pedagogy for that instrument that you're going to? And
what's great is when because you can say as a student, okay, I would address this, here's my answer. But then you have this log of 50 educators who say, oh, I would have fixed this. Right. So if everybody's saying there's a wrong note on beat 3 and they're not playing it short or whatever, and if you're talking about, the tone quality in the soprano saxophone, you might go, oh, maybe these people know what they're talking about.
Exactly. But that exists in his breakdown anyway. Right. If you look at the so-called experts and what they go, you might have 37% that all say the same thing. And then 2 people at the bottom said, the timpani is not in tune, and we're all going to hear different things, and we all have our own biases about what we want to go to and what we hear, what we want to know.
For me, it's tone. It's like if the tone's not great, I don't even care.
But for me, it's rhythm. For me, it's rhythm always comes first for me. It's a jazz thing, I guess. But when the students see that there's this variety, and then they compare all their answers and find out about where they fall, they can say, okay, now here are things that to me, the grading of that is not how did you compare to those so-called experts that did that. The grading is, what did you learn from that when you went back the next time to listen with your prior knowledge? Because that's the final for each piece. After you've gone through, after you've chosen your answers, after you've compared them to the other ones and studied that, then go back and do it one more time and write a reflection on it. There's where the learning takes place. It's not a right or wrong. It's what did you gain from this, and show me through your own words.
I had a completely random thought, if it's okay if I...
Yeah, sure.
So in the learning thing, I mean, how many people have had a concert and they have a fellow educator come and sit in the concert with an iPhone and just give a random tape? Like, has anybody asked you to come to their school concert and say, hey, would you just come and give us a tape? We'll give you $100 or whatever. And we can get a tape out of our just normal school concert.
I've had oftentimes it was a school concert that was preparing for a festival. Right.
But you invited somebody to the concert to get a tape out of that concert.
And the other way, I would be invited to somebody's school to hear what their school concert was and say, all right, here are the things the judges are probably going to comment on. You've got another week to address those. I
just think that's because all you need is a friend who you trust who can come in and
Yeah.
have to do it for free or
Right.
a
Oh
beer
yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. No, you got to take me out. You got to take me out for beer afterwards. That's what's going to be. That's a fabulous way to do those things, and it's a real method for growth. Any sort of feedback. The other thing that we used to in Massachusetts back in the world of cassette tapes and video cassettes.
Mm-hmm.
At our state festival, we used to set up a camera behind the band that filmed the conductor.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we even talked further down the road about hiring another judge whose job it was to just give the conductor feedback.
Yeah,
we've not done that. That's a budgetary thing more than anything else. But for me, especially when I was just starting out, I love those recordings of myself, and I loathe those recordings of myself.
I did that. What?
That's
really what it looked
like. And so I would do that with these students as well. Record yourself and then critique yourself. Here's another exercise with that. Fast forward it to a random place, turn the sound off. Can you tell where you are in the music by what you're conducting?
Right.
And if you're doing a march or something, maybe not, but maybe you can. Because that's the other step in this, is conducting, and meaningful, useful, efficient conducting. As one who's observed a lot of student teachers recently and a lot of new teachers when they came in, conducting, most of what we teach in conducting in college methods class, simply because there's not time, is beat patterns. Beat patterns, maybe how to raise your hand and lower your hand to make a dynamic change. Which
is 10% of what they might need from you.
If that. If that. And in a lot of cases, they don't need that at all.
Yeah.
Because once you get them started, if it's a piece that's in time, the percussion is going to take care of that.
Yeah.
Your job is to be the tour guide.
So I think there's a great wealth of knowledge people can study. And I've had a little bit of time with Alan McMurray. Alan McMurray. So he's amazing. Did a clinic at Texas, and he was the one who helped me. Of course, I wore the white shirt to the conducting clinic. I was like, I was that guy. But and then I spent some time with him when he came and did an All-State, and he did his what do you call it? When you take your 7 year after sabbatical. Right. He did his sabbatical, and he studied with, I forget the name, but the world's most famous mime.
Yeah.
And he spent all this time learning from this mime, and that's what taught him to be such, a better conductor.
Bill Rowell did that in Massachusetts. He did a whole All-State workshop on that. Worked he side by side with a mime, filling in the box, all the places you can go. But then what you have to do is you have to take all that freedom and rein it in so that it's meaningful.
Yep. But how to show things just visually.
Right. And for me, the most important things with new conductors, is having them understand that they need to anticipate the music. They can't do it when it happens. It has to be before.
We're getting softer now.
Right. Or your gesture doesn't have meaning. Right. And rhythms, punctuations, accents, you've got to be ahead of them. And that's the hardest thing to do, because they conduct at home and they hit with the music,
If you want the next part to be short in the trombones and you're putting your fingers up together because you want to show short, do it the measure before so that they can see it if they're watching you.
And give them a gesture that shows that.
Right.
And set that gesture up with your pickup. If the short note is on one, it's so they're preparing for that. Yeah. That's hard to do. It takes time.
Yeah, and one thing that helps too is I've done this more and more and done rehearsals without the score at all. And I won't say that I have it memorized, but I just take it away because I know the piece well enough.
Right.
And I hear the band so much differently.
Yeah.
And I don't pretend to be catching everything.
Right.
But when you're physically watching them play, then you realize how much you look at the score.
Right. Yeah.
Because I never look at the score, but every picture I get of myself, I'm looking at the score.
Looking at the score.
So if you just take it away and just conduct the piece the best you can, you can always find stuff to work on, and it's still there if you need it. But I was amazed how differently I heard my ensemble. In a good way. I actually heard more than I thought they were doing.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree with that completely. When I was in junior high school and high school, I grew up in Northern Virginia, in Arlington, right outside of DC. The service bands were really big down there. And Arnold Gabriel, at that point, was the conductor of the Air Force Band. We used to go watch it was such an abundance. The jazz bands for all those services and the wind bands for all those services were giving free concerts weekly somewhere in the DC area.
Wow.
It was fabulous. You could hear the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, anywhere you wanted to go. You had to come up here to New London to see the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
And the jazz bands that go with them.
Yeah. And they're all spectacular.
Yeah, and they're all spectacular. And seeing that, well, Arnold Gabriel was a bit of a savant, if you know. He never rehearsed with a score, but he could tell you every note and every articulation on every line for every instrument. Yeah. I watched him do that. I saw that when he did some regional bands when I was in junior high and then again in high school, and worked with him then. And he'd come up and they'd have a music stand for him, and he'd put his jacket on and he'd set it to the side and he'd start rehearsal with no scoring to be found. Yeah. In 1987, All Eastern was in Baltimore, and we had 7 students in, I think, that year from Lexington, and 5 of them were in the band. And so he was the conductor. I wanted to go watch this. I didn't tell them any of this. I wanted to go watch their reaction to it. So in the first rehearsal, he did the same thing. He came in, put his jacket on the stand, pushed it aside, and then he started to get into it. And then he stopped. He stopped and he said, snare drum. That's not what the man wrote in that bar. It should be bump, 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 bump. And they started looking at the music, and they looked at me, and it's like, yeah, he knows his score. Yeah, you will get nothing by him. Right, he knows. And Tony Maiello is the same way. He was a protege of Gabriel.
What's amazing to me, because
I can't do that.
A lot of people go, well, that's not me. I can't do that. Right. But
doesn't mean you shouldn't try.
You should. Yeah, and just removing it.
Right.
Doesn't mean you're saying I know all of it. Right. But it does, yeah.
You may not pick up all the harmonic inconsistencies, or you may not even pick it, but you will hear it. You'll get a better picture of the music if you spend. We are, as a majority, human beings they lean more to visual than they do to oral.
Yep.
And if you take the visual, if you let visual impede with what you're hearing,
yep,
you're going to hear less.
Yep. Especially because we're kind of, when you're conducting the piece, you're kind of hearing the track in your ear, to then compare what you're hearing to what is in your ear. So then you're like, wait a minute, I'm listening to the Marine band. I got to get that out. And actually, if you look at them, you're listening to your band.
Right.
Which isn't always as pleasant.
But you also then have a sense in here of what you want to hear.
Yep.
And that's the whole idea. If you're just looking at that and thinking about listening to the Marine band and that, you're going to miss a lot of that.
Right.
But if you have that track up here that you want to hear, and you're really focused in on what's going on out there, you're going to hear more of what you don't want to hear and know how to fix it.
I found sometimes I put more on my kids then too. Mm-hmm. I'd stop and say, we really had a chord that really wasn't balanced there. I think it was around. Does anybody know where that was? And they're like, oh yeah, it was right here. Yeah. And they would help with that too.
Right. And of course, as soon as you engage them in being a part of the solution, they're even further along than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody have an idea about, how, and I used to do that, of course, with my big band all the time, because, jazz articulation is not absolute. Are we going to play this quarter note short, or are we going to play this quarter note long? It's marked either way, be either way. What do you like? Play it both ways. Decide which one you like, and that's what we'll do. But the point is to call it out so that it is done in the section, and not everybody's doing every time they do it what they want to do.
Right.
So we have to be aware of that too.
I often find myself leaning on those section leaders and the kids for those responses when I'm starting to get frustrated. Yeah. At some point I go, you know what? I feel like I've done everything I can do, and they're not. Lead alto. Like, what do you think we should work on? Or maybe you've done it and you're like, I have 8 things in my head. We've worked on all of them 1,000 times. They're still not doing them.
Yeah.
So like, if I say something, I feel like so then you say, trombone 1, like, what do you want to work on this tune? And they go, you know what? This section is always bad. Can we do that?
Right.
You're like, yes.
Yeah.
And guess what? It gets better.
It gets better.
Because they decided to do it, not because you wanted to do it.
And because they focus on it a certain way. Right. Yeah.
And my wife, the middle school teacher, would say, that works in some grades. In some grades, it doesn't. So, yep.
Yeah. Well, giving, the older the students get, the more they're looking for that ownership.
Yeah.
And helping it along, but also setting up guardrails.
Yeah. You don't want to ask the 5th grade saxophone player what we're going to work on today.
Nope, probably not. But you might get something that's fun, or you might do that in the last 1 minute. Yeah. All right, what are we going to do right now? Yep. Hey, let's do. Yeah. And you know what? It's okay. Have a little fun. Have a little fun. Bring a little joy in. But if you're working with more sophisticated groups, asking them and relying on their interpretation, relying on what did you hear. Asking the trumpet section what they would change about the sax section, and And that's also a way to keep kids engaged in rehearsal too.
Mhm.
All right, so flutes, you're not going to be really busy here, but you're going to be our judges here as we listen to the low brass here. Tell us, some of you come up with some ideas that, and
Mhm.
even if their ideas are crazy or they're not quite sure, they're actively listening.
Yep.
And then when they pick up their flute later on, they've got the low brass in their ear because they have been paying attention to it.
Mhm.
I always talk, that's something I do in almost all the clinics I do and that sort of thing, that, especially with younger kids, it doesn't work as well with high school, but it can. Really stressing the difference between practice and rehearsal. Practice is what you do when you're home alone.
Sure.
Rehearsal is what you do when you come in with everybody else. And the purpose of rehearsal, you see it has the word rehear in it. The purpose of rehearsal is for you to learn everybody else's part, so you know how to interact with it. And you have a responsibility to come in trying to be the best prepared person in the room so you can connect with everybody else, because that's where the joy in these ensembles are.
Social emotional learning.
Right. Precisely. And, and the truth is, if you're in a math class and the student next to you gets everything wrong in his test,
You don't care.
that doesn't affect you at all.
Yeah.
But if you're sitting in a band and you're the clarinet section, the clarinetist next to you plays nothing right,
Yeah.
that hurts everything.
Yeah.
It's such a shared responsibility that you don't have anywhere else. That's one of the things that makes these things so important.
One of the other tools I use to have kids listen to each other too is this. I take it from the general music side of things, where you'll hear your teacher says, "I'm going to sing a song to the class. Everybody pat the beat with me." Right. So they're all patting, and then they sing the song.
Right.
So I'll often say, "Trumpets, let's play it. Letter D. Would everybody pat along?"
Right.
So the band is patting, and they're listening to the trumpets to make sure they stay with them. It also helps the trumpets to hear them patting and all that too.
Yeah,
So.
and I have done that with specific articulations and things. Let's have the trumpets. This articulation is a little struggle. Let's hear. First of all, let's everybody say it. Everybody say the articulation.
Right.
Okay. Now you say it while the trumpets play it.
Yep. Because the trumpets aren't getting it, so they need help from the flutes and the horns and everybody else.
Right. Yeah. It's just
The more you can involve everybody, the better off it goes.
right, and everybody can help each other. And occasionally, especially once the group gets to know each other, there's a nice little sort of fun rivalry that'll go on between sections. It's okay.
Yep.
It doesn't get to the point of being mean or really competitive. It's just sort of, we got that.
Yeah.
Which is, if it's done in the right mood, in the right sense, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
It becomes a motivator, and they still walk out together, talking, going to the next class, or meeting at lunch. So
Yeah.
that's where it starts.
I sort of have one more area I want to hit before we go.
Sure.
I hear from a lot of people who really want to work on their vertical alignment between specifically beginning band and middle school and high school, getting one cohesive program. So if you're in a district where there's somebody who's a coordinator for that, or a supervisor, whatever the role is, hopefully their job is to make that happen and to help foster that.
Right.
So I think everybody would agree they want to be on the same page with all the other teachers in their district. So what are some tips? Say there's this place and there is no coordinator, which is, I think most places don't have a coordinator. I'd say if you go around the country, the majority of places don't have somebody. They just have, say, 2 individual teachers.
Or regional districts, which, would you have, we have them all over Massachusetts, where you have, an elementary school in this town, an elementary and middle school in this town, they combine for a middle school, and they combine with 2 other towns to come to the high school.
So what are some ways that people can help with that vertical alignment? I mean, I would say, one thing I've said in the past is, if you're a high school teacher, listen to your middle school teachers. Don't try to tell them what to do. That's not going to work.
If your schedule allows it, be in the middle school rehearsal as often as you can. Yeah. That's 2 things. That not only serves alignment, that serves recruitment. You have a high school band director has no idea how much of an impact you can have if you go up to a trombone player who might be disgruntled, might be enjoying himself, just pat him on the shoulder and say, "Well, that's really good work. I can't wait till you get to the high school." And the kid maybe who was thinking about quitting is now thinking, ambition. He's got someone said something good about me. But the idea of watching and getting together and sharing is really important. Alignment. See, it's funny, when we redid our curriculum learning outcomes for the elementary general music teachers, and there are 6 schools in Lexington. We had 7 teachers because one travels and picks up the overflow. And for me, what was important is what students learn, not how teachers taught. As long as we have goals about what the curriculum is and what we want them to learn, in general music particularly, there's so many ways to go about looking at the same things, whether you're subscribing to Or for Kodai or anything else that's out there. It's a little bit different instrumentally. One of the things we talked about and tried to do this, I see it's another thing. See, this didn't happen when I was coordinator. It was happened when I was a high school band director, is when we were trying to really do this. We got more lined up once I was a coordinator because I had hired some of my former students and they were on board with what we were doing. That was part of their regular take, but that wasn't always the case. But we would talk about trying to use the same rhythm syllables. I'm a big Gordon rhythm syllable fan. Let's start there. So we're speaking a common language. And I got our high school choir director to go that way too. The middle schoolers felt less comfortable with that because they didn't know it as well. And I wasn't going to go down and say, you have to learn this if you're going to keep your job. You know, that's not the way you do it.
What's the Gordon? I mean, I've heard about it.
Gordon is that every pulse is a do. Do. If it's a, you don't think 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. And the whole thing comes down to music moves in twos or moves in threes.
Duple or triple.
And if you're in duple, it's do day, do day, do day, do day. 16th notes, do to data, do to data, do to data, do to data. Do data, do data, do data, do. So that's an eighth of 2/16. All right. If it's triplet, it's do da dee, 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 or do da da dee, do da da dee, do da da dee. Right. So you can divide. You can get pretty sophisticated with this in terms of learning them. And then there might be exercises, rhythm exercises that you hand out that are Gordon based that actually have the words on them and have rhythms. Our idea is to get students to look at rhythm patterns like they look at words, and not look at the individual letters, but recognize the pattern. And then if that pattern goes with something they can verbally speak to, all of a sudden it's easier for them.
And when you do that starting in kindergarten with the flashcards and all the things, and then by the time they get to band, they literally can read any rhythm you ever give them.
Now that's
the goal.
Our elementary staff was a phenomenal staff, still are phenomenal staff in Lexington, but everybody had a different background of training. There was Dalcroze, there was Orff, there was Kodai, there was a more traditional singing method. So use what works for you, but these are the concepts we want. We want every fifth grader to have had this by the time they finish, and they connect and coordinate. What are we going to teach? How are we going to teach? All right, and this is how I'm going to do it.
And say you're talking about only 2 directors, a high school and then a 5 to 8 director, whatever. And they don't come from the same place. Somebody's new, somene's been there a long time. Just get together.
Build a relationship.
And you got to compromise somewhere.
Also, invite them up to see what you do. Can you come watch me and give me some tips? Think about, I'd like to have another expert on the outside. I'd like to have someone, another staff member sort of watching me because they're things that I can't see. And maybe we can swap over with that. It's building a relationship and just offering to help each other, because if you help each other, you help yourselves. If the middle school band director makes the high school better, the middle school people are going to want to go, and more people are going to sign up for your elementary bands. Right? So it's a matter of making the program more attractive by everybody pitching in and working together. And sometimes that's hard to do, even with a coordinator. Because it's
people are tenured and
right, and you just can't go in and when back in the mid '80s had someone came on and in his first faculty. This is another person who was hired. I'm talking 1988, 88, 89 school year. He was hired by a fairly big committee. He was hired against the wishes of the three people on the panel who were music teachers. They thought he would get along great with the superintendent. And his first day was, now everybody will be teaching rhythm this in such a way in every classroom. And when I walk in a classroom, I want to see this going on. So suddenly, the first day of school, when everybody's working together, they've been told by their boss that they all have to completely change up the way they've taught rhythm their whole lives. It's just really hard to do that. If there's an understanding and if things are done right, you can make it work like multilingualism in European schools. You can speak both, this language and that language, and have kids understand both.
Yeah.
Look, in elementary school, you were taught ta, ta, ti, ti, ta. Now we're doing do, de, do. For me, as an instrumentalist, I like the do sound because that matches an articulation. Do, 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 do. You can keep your embouchure pretty much in the same place and say those rhythms. It also takes the counting and the numbers out of it, which I like a lot.
Yep.
Everybody understands where intellectually they get 1, 2, 3, 4, but it makes mixed meters,
Yep.
Do to da di, do to do da di, do to do da di, do to do da di. You can go that 2 and 3 thing and shift it all around. And once you get it, you can get it there. But even if you just do it on a neutral syllable, da 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 da, and get them articulating the rhythm, you're on the right step. Usually you can find common ground there with everybody being willing to do that.
Yep.
Right. You may want to do it a different way, but really just get them speaking it. Let's scaffold it this way. Let's get them speaking it before they're playing it. Let's have them playing it on one note before they play it with the notes that are on the page.
Yeah.
Just think about those approaches, and let's make that work so we offer our children more of an opportunity to be successful. It's really difficult unless you have a 2-week-long summer workshop where you're all getting paid to come in the summer and work on that curriculum that you're going to develop and do it this way, and then provide professional development money for them to go out and learn what you learned in college and they learned in a different way. It's hard. It really is hard. There's not a unifying way. But your recommendation of being visible at the middle school if you're a high school director, being visible at the high school if you're the middle school director, helping each other out, supporting each other along the way. And your schedules may or may not permit that all the time, but come to each other's concerts. Find staff meetings where you can get together. Find a way that you can talk about what's going on. How can I help you? Yeah. What do you need? For us at some points, it became instruments. When I became the coordinator, it was the middle school. Well, we really have trouble, filling out a low brass because the budget director has told us that we can't take instruments over this size on the bus.
Right. We deal with the same thing.
Yeah. So we've got to have, so we worked out problems. Let's figure out how to get this instrumentation going. And what we came out with when we sat down, we started out with buying a bunch of French horns, euphoniums, trombones. No, not trombones. French horns, euphoniums, and tubas. Bought a bunch of them because that's where most of the need was. Yep. We had what we needed for bari sax and tenor saxes at each of the schools, and bassoons, which they can oddly enough take on the bus because they fit. Yeah. But they make bass clarinets like that too. Yeah, they do. That's amazing. We have a couple of those. They're great. They make them. They're 5-piece, and and they're small enough to carry on, and that works really well. And you can find them for beginners. I thought it was an alto. I'm like, no, I'm buying a bassoon. I mean, a bass clarinet. It's like, no, it's a bass clarinet. Yeah, no, that's great. But then the other solution, we were struggling with trombones. And this was just after the P-bone came out. Yeah. So I asked a couple of trombone players, how are they? And then I went and saw the Pops at one of their Christmas concerts. Yeah. The trombone section stood up and they had red and green P-bones. Now, of course, they were using their own mouthpieces. Yeah. So I thought, wow, this is brilliant. $125 for each of these instruments. We had 6 elementary schools. I bought 24 of them, plus 24 good quality mouthpieces to go with them. And what we said to kids when we auditioned, they had that P-bone right out there. They said, look, if you're not sure and you don't want to purchase an instrument yet, and you sign up, you can get in the lottery and we'll give you one of the 4 trombones. You don't have to purchase or rent an instrument to start this year. When you get to the middle school, you'll have to make a decision to what you need to do there. Yeah. And then you'll have to rent your own trombone. Or if you feel like it, we have euphoniums and tubas. And it's just, you're reading the same clefs, you're reading the same notes, you're just learning the fingers instead of this, which is easier, and you can switch to euphonium tuba. All of a sudden, our low brass blew up. Yeah. We had, as I say, we had 24 P-bones around. We started 34 trombones that year because 4 of them said, "Oh, we'll get our own. We want to play," and it got exciting. A lot of everybody does their recruiting in a different way. We used to start with the faculty would go around and to each school and play. Yeah. And we had a really, really, really good French horn player on our faculty. And she would stand up and play the opening bit of Star Wars, and all of a sudden we'd have 20 French horns sounding.
That's a good problem to have.
Right. But what you have to do is what I did in my first year teaching is I played the Muppet Show theme on the saxophone, and the whole world wanted, and we had way too damn many saxophones anyway. Yeah. So recruiting is building relationships within your team.
Yeah.
And being there, showing up.
Yeah.
Go to their concerts, talk to parents, connect.
Yep. Listen.
Yeah, exactly.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for making the drive.
My pleasure. It was a nice trip up.
Fun.
It's comfortable. Yeah. It's nice to talk with you.
Yeah, you too.
Looking forward to come out and visit up in Maine fairly soon. I've been a while. Last thing I did was something, it was before COVID.
Maine is the way life should be.
Was it District 2? Is that where Chris Humphrey is?
Yes.
I did the District 2 concert band a few years back, and just had a ball with everybody. Everybody was so nice. And we just had such a good time, and the kids were great. So it's always fun to come up here.
What's a piece you like that the majority of high schools or middle schools can play?
A piece that I like the majority of high schools and middle schools
like a concert band piece, jazz ensemble piece.
Yep.
Something.
Wow.
Something's not too hard. Sorry, I just threw that at you. We can cut it out if we need to.
Yeah. All right. There are certain pieces that I thought, for me with the wind ensemble that I would do every 4 years or every periodic, because I thought they just should pieces everybody know. And then one of them was Linkage Posey, which not every high school is going to be able to tackle,
right?
But do 3 movements of it. You can do that. Love Vigils Keep, Julie Giroux's. Love that piece. But those are grade 5, 6 pieces. Those are more difficult.
Yeah.
There are a lot of Julie Giroux's work. One of her newest, The Beautiful.
One Life Beautiful.
Yes, One Life. Yeah. In this case, it's a gorgeous piece. Yeah. And technically, all capable. Musically, really scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm ready to. I think when we're blending and mixing things, it's really important to cover, the wind band tradition as well as the contemporary wind band.
Yep.
For jazz ensemble, for me, the biggest thing for me with jazz ensembles is I want the pieces to be from the idiom. Mm-hmm. I want them to be, most times, not always a big band piece.
Yeah.
And it can be something contemporary. It can be something Gordon Goodwin wrote or something like that. But let's find a competent arranger that has a standard out there that I can go back and listen to the original quintet, and I can use it as a teaching tool.
Yep.
I think as long as it's idiomatic, and then you can use it. And there are so many varieties of, so many levels of difficulty for those type of pieces out there. Yeah. That is the qualification for me, is that I want it to be idiomatic, not something that is, theme from the latest movie for jazz ensemble, Marvel Comics in jazz or whatever.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, I wasn't. Yeah, there's so many great concert band wind ensemble pieces out there.
It's hard to choose.
Yeah, I used to love a lot of the bel canto pieces. I think I mentioned the Morton Nordson. That's great.
Actually, Jared can conduct that. When our group played at All Eastern 10 years ago, we shared the concert with Jared's group when he was in Wyndham.
Yep.
And he did that piece.
Yep. That's a great piece. Great piece. Yeah. A lot of the things that I was really fortunate in a lot of ways, because we had a big program and I had a complete instrumentation, and I rarely had holes in my instrumentation. Yeah. So like in 2005, Frank Battisti set us up with the BandQuest company, and we did the commission and the premiere of the piece that Gunther Schuller wrote, which has no business being in the BandQuest library because it was just way too hard. Huh. It was one of the most traumatic experiences of my career that turned out to be one of the really good ones, because I just assumed that he would write something within the limits of what they talked about. You're familiar with BandQuest.
Yeah.
And, the limited ranges, the limited
Not that one.
Trumpet to E flat above the staff, flutes playing chromatic lines up to the high C, prominent solos for E flat clarinet, English horn, 2-octave crotales, and starting out with 2 tubas with mutes and a tritone. And I really honestly believe that he would follow all of that. And he said, well, when do you need it? It's my 80th birthday, and I've got a lot of things going on. And I said, well, we're performing it at Allstate March 17th. If I can get it by the end of January, that'll be fine. The score opened up. I went, Oh,
we need more time.
No, we got to work.
Yeah.
And we wound up doing a really good job on it. He conducted it at Allstate. And I was warned by my friends from the conservatory, you better have them ready or Gunther's coming after you, because that's what he does. I was like, we did a lot of work. The kids were great. They were super. And it was such a great experience. He handwrote all the parts, which I copied and gave each kid their own individual part. And there was a line of about 30 kids who wanted his autograph on their part after we had our rehearsal. So for me, they got it. They understood they were in the presence of genius, and this was a rare and important opportunity. So I was lucky with that. So instrumentation was never something that I had to shy away from when I was looking at pieces. And that's a little harder. I mean, I love the stuff that Randall Standridge is doing now for flex bands and he's writing good music for kids. Sure. And he's got a good core of composers. Right. So some of my favorite pieces may not match what's on there, because we all think about to our own high school experiences. For me, I graduated from high school in 1975, So at that point it was, let's play the whole suites and let's play, the Vaughan Williams, and I love them. They are good music, and I had a good time playing them.
There's a piece that reminds me, I guess I'll say there's a lot of newer pieces in the last 10 years that sound like those pieces, but they're newer versions of those pieces. And I'm not going to say they stack up to them, but like when I'm working on parts of Songs of Old Kentucky by Brant Carrick, I'm like, this is just amazing American music.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
It sounds just like Holst wrote it or Vaughan Williams wrote it.
I love Brant's writing too. Yeah. We've done several things by him. He was a judge in our school for a little bit and stayed around. We went out to dinner, and I actually went up to UNH when he was there, and we took our group up, and he clinicked with us. And he's a great guy. But what a great piece that is. Great piece. Yeah. So that's to me, that's the best thing about now versus when I started. There is such a wealth of great literature and recordings for them. Yeah. And at a variety of different levels. Yeah. There are really good composers writing for young bands.
And a video of the score.
Right.
Before you buy it.
Right. Yeah. It's all there. There's no reason to program Drek anymore.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks.
Yes, and thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the talk.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.